The arrival of the Williams family. The sun gleamed on the bustling port as the Williams family, Elijah, his wife Naomi, and their teenage son Jaden, stood before the majestic cruise ship. The sleek hull shimmered under the golden rays, promising days of luxury and relaxation. Elijah, a high-ranking executive at a Fortune 500 company, had planned this vacation meticulously to celebrate his recent promotion and allow his family some much-needed time together. Dressed in casual but elegant attire, the family exuded confidence. Elijah, a composed and dignified man in his early 40s, carried himself with an air of authority. Beside him, Naomi's warm smile lit up her face, her demeanor effortlessly complementing her husband's poise. Jaden, a basketball prodigy with a sharp sense of humor, kept his eyes glued to his phone, occasionally glancing up to take in the grandeur of the ship. "This is going to be epic," Jaden said with a smirk, momentarily pulling his eyes away from the screen. Elijah chuckled. "Glad you approve, son. Let's make it a trip to remember." They approached the premium check-in area, a designated section separated from the main crowd by velvet ropes. Elijah had spared no expense, booking the Neptune Suite, a premium accommodation offering breathtaking ocean views and top-tier amenities. The family handed their boarding passes to Karen Shaw, the senior crew member overseeing the premium check-ins. Karen, a middle-aged woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, barely glanced at them before narrowing her eyes. Her practiced smile faltered as she scrutinized the family, her gaze lingering a moment too long. "This area is reserved for premium suite guests," she said curtly, her tone carrying an edge. "That's correct," Elijah replied, his voice calm. "We're staying in the Neptune Suite." Karen's lips thinned as she studied their boarding passes with exaggerated precision. "I see. Well, I'll need to verify this." Without waiting for a response, she grabbed the tickets and disappeared into the back office. Jaden shifted uncomfortably, his frustration evident. "Why does she think we don't belong here?" "Jaden, let's not jump to conclusions," Naomi said softly, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Maybe it's just a mix-up." Elijah remained composed but alert, observing the situation with a practiced eye. Years of navigating high-stakes corporate environments had honed his ability to detect subtle prejudice. He exchanged a knowing glance with Naomi, who silently acknowledged his concern. Karen returned after several minutes, her expression begrudging. "It appears your tickets are valid," she said, handing them back without offering an apology. "You may proceed to the premium cabin." "Thank you," Elijah said firmly, his tone courteous but authoritative. He waited for Karen to meet his gaze, but she avoided his eyes, gesturing vaguely toward the premium elevators. As the family walked away, Naomi leaned in and whispered, "That wasn't subtle." "No, it wasn't," Elijah replied. His voice was calm, but the tightness in his jaw betrayed his irritation. Inside the premium section, the atmosphere shifted. Polished marble floors, sparkling chandeliers, and the quiet hum of soft music created a serene and exclusive environment. Jaden's irritation seemed to dissipate as he took in the opulence. "Okay, this is more like it," he said, flopping onto a plush sofa in their suite. Naomi chuckled. "Let's focus on enjoying ourselves." Elijah, however, was less willing to brush aside the encounter. Standing on the balcony, he gazed at the vast ocean stretching to the horizon. His thoughts churned as he recalled Karen's demeanor. It wasn't the first time he had encountered subtle hostility cloaked in protocol, and he doubted it would be the last. Still, he hoped the incident would remain an isolated case. But his instincts told him otherwise. Meanwhile, Karen lingered at the check-in desk, watching the family disappear into the premium section. Her expression was a mix of suspicion and resentment. Turning to a junior crew member beside her, she muttered, "Did you notice anything unusual about them?" The younger staff member frowned. "No, ma'am. Their tickets were in order." Karen's gaze remained fixed on the direction the Williams family had gone. "Maybe," she said cryptically, "but I've got a feeling about them." For the Williams family, The first encounter with Karen was just a minor inconvenience. Yet, as they unpacked and settled into their suite, Elijah couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that this was only the beginning. Naomi sensed his tension and placed a comforting hand on his arm. "We'll handle whatever comes our way," she said with quiet determination. Elijah nodded. "We always do." The family resolved to enjoy their trip, but the undercurrents of tension hinted at the storm brewing beneath the surface. Little did they know, the next few days would test their resilience and strength in ways they hadn't anticipated. A seat at the table. The morning after their arrival, the Williams family woke up to the sound of waves gently lapping against the ship's hull. Sunlight streamed through the curtains of their Neptune suite, bathing the room in a warm glow. Naomi stretched and smiled, the tension of the previous day melting away. Elijah sat on the balcony, sipping his morning coffee, while Jaden scrolled through social media on his phone. Breakfast in the premium dining lounge, Naomi suggested, adjusting the strap of her sundress. "It's the perfect way to start the day." Jaden grinned, tossing his phone aside. "As long as it's all you can eat pancakes, count me in." Elijah chuckled, standing to join his family. Let's see if the lounge lives up to the hype. The family made their way to the exclusive dining area, reserved for premium suite guests. The scent of freshly brewed coffee and warm pastries filled the air, and the gentle hum of classical music added a touch of elegance to the ambience. Jaden's eyes lit up as he spotted the array of gourmet dishes displayed on the buffet. "This is what I'm talking about," he said, rubbing his hands together. As they approached the hostess stand, Karen Shaw appeared from behind the counter. Her clipboard was clutched tightly in her hand, and her lips curved into a strained smile. "Good morning," Karen said, her tone clipped. "May I see your breakfast reservation?" Elijah handed over their confirmation, his demeanor calm but watchful. "Here it is." Karen barely glanced at the paper before shaking her head. "I'm afraid your name isn't on the list." Jaden frowned. "What? We're staying in the Neptune suite. This is where we're supposed to eat." Karen's smile grew tighter. "The lounge is reserved for premium guests with verified reservations. I suggest you head to the general dining area on deck 6. Naomi took a deep breath, placing a calming hand on Jaden's shoulder. "Karen, this must be a mistake. We have our confirmation right here." Karen's eyes flickered, and her expression hardened. "I'll need to check with the maitre d'. Please wait here." As Karen disappeared into the back, Jaden muttered under his breath, "This is ridiculous. She's doing this on purpose." Elijah placed a hand on his son's shoulder, his voice calm but firm. "Patience, Jaden. Let her dig her own hole." Minutes passed, and the family stood awkwardly by the entrance, drawing curious glances from other passengers. Naomi's reassuring smile began to waver, and Elijah's jaw tightened with frustration. When Karen finally returned, her expression was guarded. "I've double-checked, and unfortunately, there's no space available for you this morning." Elijah's brows furrowed. "Space available. We're premium guests. That's non-negotiable." Karen raised her chin, her tone icy. "You're welcome to try the buffet on deck 6. They serve the same high-quality food." Jaden's patience snapped. "You've got to be kidding me. This is how you treat people who paid for a luxury experience." Karen's gaze sharpened. "Young man, I suggest you watch your tone." Elijah stepped forward, placing himself between Karen and his family. "This isn't about tone. It's about respect, which you seem to have forgotten. We'll take this up with management." Without waiting for a response, Elijah turned on his heel and led his family away. Jaden muttered angrily under his breath, and Naomi walked silently beside her husband, her face clouded with worry. Deck 6 was a stark contrast to the premium dining lounge. The general buffet was bustling with activity, filled with families and children running between tables. The clatter of dishes and chatter of voices created a lively but chaotic atmosphere. Jaden slumped into a chair, crossing his arms. "This isn't breakfast," he grumbled. "This is a zoo." Naomi reached across the table, placing a comforting hand on his arm. It's not ideal, but let's try to make the best of it. Elijah remained quiet, scrolling through his phone. His fingers moved with precision as he composed a message to Victor Hughes, a senior executive at the cruise line, and a longtime acquaintance. Subject: Incident with crew member. Hi Victor, I hope this message finds you well. I wanted to flag an issue we encountered with a senior crew member, Karen Shaw. She's consistently treating us as if we don't belong in the premium areas we paid for. This morning, she denied us access to the exclusive dining lounge despite our confirmed reservation. I'm concerned this may be part of a larger issue. Please advise. Best, Elijah Williams. Satisfied, Elijah hit send and placed his phone back in his pocket. Naomi noticed the tension in his expression and leaned closer. You reached out to Victor. Elijah nodded. This isn't just about us. If she's doing this to our family, who else is she targeting? Jaden, still fuming, folded his arms. You should have called her out right there, Dad. Let everyone see what kind of person she is. Elijah gave his son a measured look. There's a time and place, Jaden. Making a scene wouldn't help us. It would just give her more ammunition. As the family settled into their meal, Elijah's phone buzzed with a response from Victor. He read the message aloud, his voice steady. Elijah, I'm sorry to hear about this. I'll escalate the issue with the captain immediately. Please continue documenting everything, and let me know if there's any further trouble. Naomi exhaled, a mix of relief and lingering frustration. At least someone is listening. Let's see how quickly they act, Elijah replied, his voice calm but firm. For now, we move forward. Back in the premium dining lounge, Karen stood at the hostess stand, her expression smug as she watched the Williams family retreat. Her moment of satisfaction, however, was short-lived. A junior crew member approached her cautiously. Ma'am, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Their reservation was confirmed. Karen's smile vanished, and she tightened her grip on her clipboard. Are you questioning my judgment? She snapped. The junior staff member hesitated. No, ma'am. But shouldn't we make sure there's no mistake? Karen straightened her posture, her voice cold. I've already handled it. If they have a complaint, they can take it up with guest services. The junior crew member nodded reluctantly and stepped away. Karen's gaze lingered on the entrance, her mind racing. She couldn't shake the feeling that Elijah Williams was a man who wouldn't let this go. And she was right. The poolside incident. The sun was high, and the breeze carried the salty scent of the sea as the Williams family headed to the private pool reserved for premium passengers. Jaden walked ahead, bouncing a basketball with a light rhythm against the polished ship deck. Naomi followed with a tote bag slung over her shoulder, containing sunscreen, books, and towels. Elijah trailed behind, his demeanor calm but vigilant. The tension from the previous day lingered, but the family was determined to enjoy their trip. Does this place really have an infinity pool? Jaden asked, spinning the basketball on his finger. Naomi chuckled. That's what the brochure said. Let's hope it lives up to the hype. As they approached the entrance to the exclusive pool area, a frosted glass partition separated the premium section from the general pool below. The private space was serene, with cushioned lounge chairs, shaded cabanas, and the shimmering water of an infinity pool that seemed to merge with the horizon. Jaden's eyes lit up. This is what I'm talking about. But their excitement was short-lived. Standing at the entrance was Karen Shaw, clipboard in hand, her posture stiff with authority. She spotted the Williams family and immediately stepped forward, her expression sharp. Good afternoon, Karen said briskly, blocking their path. This area is fully reserved for the day. Elijah frowned. Reserved. We're premium passengers. There shouldn't be a need for reservations. Karen's gaze was cold, and her smile was perfunctory. Unfortunately, all the lounge chairs and cabanas have been taken. You're welcome to use the main pool on deck 6. Jaden's excitement evaporated. The one with kids screaming and splashing everywhere. No thanks. Naomi stepped forward, her tone measured but firm. Karen, this doesn't seem right. We can see several open chairs from here. Karen stiffened, her grip on the clipboard tightening. Those are being held for other guests. I'm afraid there's no room for you. Jaden clenched his fists, his voice rising. This is ridiculous. Why do you keep treating us like we don't belong? Karen's eyes narrowed. Young man, I suggest you watch your tone. Elijah stepped between his son and Karen, his voice calm but resolute. This is enough, Karen. You've crossed the line more than once, and I'm done tolerating it. Move aside. Karen didn't budge, her stance defiant. Sir, I'm following protocol. If you have an issue, I suggest you take it up with guest services. Jaden muttered under his breath. This isn't about protocol. She just doesn't want us here. Naomi placed a hand on Jaden's arm, her voice soothing. Let's not make a scene. We'll figure this out. But Elijah wasn't willing to back down. He took a step closer to Karen, his tone steel-like. Move. Now. The quiet authority in his voice made Karen hesitate. She glanced around, noticing several passengers watching the confrontation from nearby cabanas. Whispers began to spread, and the weight of their stares seemed to unsettle her. Reluctantly, Karen stepped aside, her expression sour. Do as you please, she muttered, her voice low but venomous. The Williams family walked past her, Jaden still muttering under his breath. Naomi exhaled deeply, her face tight with unease. Elijah exchanged a glance with her, silently conveying his frustration. Once they found a spot by the pool, the family tried to relax. Jaden took to the infinity pool, his earlier irritation giving way to the joy of swimming in the crystal-clear water. Naomi reclined on a lounge chair, flipping through a book, while Elijah leaned against the railing, staring out at the endless expanse of blue. But their tranquility was short-lived. Karen had returned, lingering near the entrance and speaking in hushed tones with another crew member. Elijah noticed her furtive glances in their direction and frowned. He moved to Naomi's side, lowering his voice. She's not done, he said. Naomi looked up from her book, following his gaze. What do you mean? Elijah nodded toward Karen. She's scheming something. Look at her. Naomi's brow furrowed. Maybe she's just angry we stood our ground. Maybe, Elijah said, though his instincts told him otherwise. A few minutes later, Karen approached their area again, clipboard in hand. This time, she brought along 2 uniformed security officers. The murmur of nearby passengers grew louder as the scene unfolded. Karen's voice was loud enough to draw attention. I'm sorry, Mr. Williams, but I've received complaints that your family is using an area that's reserved for other guests. I'll have to ask you to leave. Elijah turned to face her, his expression unreadable. Complaints? From whom? Karen hesitated for a split second before replying. That's confidential. Elijah crossed his arms. Confidential? Let me guess, there's no record of these complaints. The security officers exchanged uneasy glances, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. One of them stepped forward, his tone conciliatory. Sir, if there's been a misunderstanding, we can look into it. There's no misunderstanding, Elijah said firmly. We're premium guests, and we're entitled to use this area. I'd like to see these supposed complaints. Karen's face flushed, but she refused to back down. I'm simply enforcing policy. No, you're not. Elijah interrupted, his voice rising slightly. You're targeting my family because you don't think we belong here. Well, guess what? We do. And I'm done playing games. The tension in the air was palpable. Several passengers had gathered nearby, some murmuring in support of the Williams family, others shaking their heads at Karen's behavior. One woman stepped forward, her voice clear. I've been here all morning, and I didn't see anyone complain. This family has done nothing wrong. Karen shot the woman a glare but said nothing. Elijah took a step closer to the security officers, his tone firm but calm. Check the cameras. You'll see we've done nothing except sit here and enjoy the amenities we paid for. And while you're at it, check how many empty chairs are available. The lead officer nodded. We'll do that, sir. Please remain here while we review the footage. Karen's face grew pale, and she clutched her clipboard tightly. She opened her mouth to protest, but the officer raised a hand. We'll handle this, ma'am. As the officers left to review the footage, Karen retreated, her steps stiff and hurried. Naomi placed a hand on Elijah's arm, her voice low. Do you think this will finally end it? Elijah exhaled deeply, his frustration evident. I hope so, but people like her don't back down easily. Jaden emerged from the pool, water dripping from its hair. What's going on now? Karen brought security, Naomi said, shaking her head. But your dad set them straight. Jaden rolled his eyes. Of course she did. She just can't stand losing. Elijah glanced toward the horizon, his mind racing. He knew the fight wasn't over, but he also knew he had allies, both on the ship and beyond. If Karen wanted a battle, she was about to get one. 15 minutes later, the security officers returned, their expressions neutral but their decision clear. The lead officer approached Elijah. We reviewed the footage, he said. There were no complaints made about your family, and the area has plenty of available seating. You're free to stay. Karen's face darkened as the officer turned to her. Ma'am, we'll need to discuss this further with management. Please accompany us. The murmurs of the crowd grew louder, and a few passengers clapped quietly as Karen was escorted away. Elijah turned to Naomi and Jaden, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Well, that's one problem solved. Naomi sighed in relief. Let's hope it's the last. But Elijah wasn't so sure. He could sense Karen's resentment simmering beneath the surface, and he knew she wasn't done. Not yet. Karen's last stand. The ship was alive with energy as passengers buzzed about the upcoming gala night. The evening promised an elegant affair, with fine dining, live music, and the chance to mingle with other premium guests. For the Williams family, it was an opportunity to reset after the escalating tension with Karen Shaw. Elijah had made it clear to Naomi and Jaden that tonight was about reclaiming the joy of their vacation. Jaden adjusted the bow tie on his tuxedo, grumbling under his breath. Do I really have to wear this? I look like a penguin. Naomi laughed softly, brushing lint off his shoulder. You look handsome, Jaden. This is gala night. Let's enjoy it. Elijah entered the room, his tailored suit emphasizing his confident demeanor. You ready? He asked, glancing at Jaden's reflection in the mirror. As ready as I'll ever be, Jaden replied with a smirk. The family made their way to the ballroom, where chandeliers cast a warm glow over the elegant space. Waitstaff in crisp uniforms moved gracefully among the guests, offering champagne and hors d'oeuvres. A live string quartet played softly in the background, adding to the ambience. This is more like it, Naomi said, linking her arm through Elijah's. Jaden's eyes scanned the room. No sign of her, he muttered. Let's not even bring her up tonight, Naomi said firmly. This is our time. But as they approached their assigned table, Karen Shaw's familiar figure emerged from the crowd, clipboard in hand. Her polished smile didn't reach her eyes, and her presence immediately set Elijah on edge. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Williams, Karen said, her tone laced with artificial cheer. I hope you're enjoying the cruise. Elijah's expression remained neutral, though his eyes were sharp. Good evening, Karen. Is there something you need? Karen gestured to the table behind her. I just wanted to ensure everything is in order for you. As one of our premium families, we've prepared a special seating arrangement for tonight's dinner. Naomi frowned. We already have our table assignment. Karen's smile tightened. Of course, but we've made adjustments to better accommodate all our guests. I'm sure you'll find it satisfactory. Jaden raised an eyebrow. Adjustments. What does that mean? Karen ignored him, motioning toward a table near the back of the room, far from the main dining area. The table was smaller and lacked the elegant centerpiece decorations present on others. Elijah's jaw tightened. That table doesn't look like it belongs in this section. Karen's voice remained saccharine. It's the only table available after the changes were made. Please understand, we've had an influx of requests tonight, and seating arrangements had to be adjusted accordingly. Naomi's face betrayed her frustration. This feels deliberate, Karen. I assure you, Mom, it's not, Karen said, her tone dripping with Fox's sincerity. Elijah took a step closer, his voice calm but commanding. Enough. We're not moving to that table. We'll sit where we were originally assigned. Karen's smile faltered for the briefest moment, but she quickly regained her composure. Mr. Williams, I'm afraid I can't allow that. Those seats have been reassigned. Elijah didn't blink. Then bring the captain here. Now. The surrounding tables had gone quiet, the tension palpable. Guests nearby exchanged looks, clearly uncomfortable with the scene unfolding. Karen hesitated, the color draining from her face. That won't be necessary, she said finally, her voice quieter. No, Elijah said firmly, his tone cutting through the room. It is necessary. If you won't resolve this, someone else will. A ripple of murmurs spread through the ballroom as passengers began whispering to one another. Karen's carefully crafted facade was crumbling under the weight of Elijah's unwavering stance. Before Karen could respond, another voice broke through the tension. What seems to be the problem here? Captain Reynolds stepped forward, his presence commanding immediate attention. He was flanked by Cynthia, the ship's operations manager. Their expressions were a mixture of curiosity and concern. Karen stiffened, her clipboard clutched tightly in her hands. Captain, there was a misunderstanding with the table arrangements. I was just explaining. Elijah cut her off. There's no misunderstanding. This is another attempt to exclude my family from the experience we paid for. Karen's actions have been consistent since day one. Captain Reynolds frowned, his gaze shifting to Karen. Is this true? Karen stammered, her usual confidence faltering. I was just following protocol, Captain. There were adjustments made due to capacity. Cynthia stepped forward, her voice sharp. Protocol doesn't justify singling out guests or denying them the experience they were promised. Karen's face turned red, and she opened her mouth to protest, but Cynthia raised a hand. Enough. We've received multiple complaints about your behavior, and it's become clear there's a pattern here. The captain turned to Elijah. Mr. Williams, on behalf of the crew, I apologize for the treatment your family has endured. This is unacceptable, and I assure you it will be addressed. Elijah nodded, his expression calm but firm. Thank you, Captain. All we've wanted is to enjoy our vacation without unnecessary obstacles. Karen's lips tightened into a thin line as the captain turned back to her. Ms. Shaw, please hand over your clipboard and step aside. You're relieved of your duties for the remainder of this voyage. A gasp rippled through the room, and Karen's eyes widened. Captain, This is not up for debate, the captain said, his tone final. Karen hesitated for a moment before slowly handing over the clipboard. Her movements were stiff, her expression a mix of humiliation and anger. As she walked away, the murmurs in the room grew louder, passengers exchanging glances and nods in quiet approval. Cynthia turned to the Williams family. We'll ensure your evening proceeds without further disruption. Your original table is waiting for you. Thank you, Naomi said, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. Elijah led his family to their table, his shoulders relaxing slightly. Jaden leaned in as they sat down. Does this mean we can finally enjoy dinner without drama? Naomi chuckled softly. Let's hope so. The evening continued with a renewed sense of calm. The tension of Karen's presence lifted. As the family enjoyed their meal, they couldn't help but feel a quiet sense of victory. But Elijah knew the battle wasn't over yet. There was still work to be done to ensure no other family endured the same treatment, and he was ready to see it through. The fallout. The atmosphere in the Neptune suite was heavy with reflection the morning after the gala. The Williams family sat around the table on their private balcony, a sumptuous breakfast spread before them. The ocean shimmered under the rising sun, but the air carried a sense of unfinished business. Naomi sipped her coffee, her eyes searching Elijah's face. "Last night was a step forward, but I can tell you're not done." Elijah leaned back in his chair, his expression calm but resolute. "Karen's removal from her duties is a start, but it doesn't address the systemic issues behind her behavior. She was confident enough to act that way because she didn't think there'd be consequences. That's a bigger problem." Jaden, biting into a croissant, glanced between his parents. "So what's the plan? We're not just letting it slide, right?" Elijah's lips curved into a faint smile. "Oh, we're definitely not letting it slide. But we'll handle it strategically." Naomi reached across the table, placing her hand over Elijah's. "Just promise me you won't let this consume our trip. We still have time to enjoy ourselves." "I promise," Elijah said, squeezing her hand. "But if we don't address this, it'll keep happening. To us and to others." Later that afternoon, Elijah found himself in a quiet meeting room on the ship's executive floor, seated across from Captain Reynolds and Cynthia, the operations manager. The small space was lined with nautical-themed decor, but the serious expressions on the captain's and Cynthia's faces made it clear this wasn't a routine discussion. "Thank you for meeting with me," Elijah began, his tone measured but firm. "I want to start by saying I appreciate the steps you've taken so far, but I think we both know this issue goes beyond Karen Shaw." Captain Reynolds nodded, his gaze steady. "You're right, Mr. Williams. While Karen's behavior was unacceptable, it's also a symptom of a larger problem. We've had other complaints about her in the past, but none as detailed or well-documented as yours." Elijah leaned forward slightly. "That's part of the issue, Captain. Without accountability, people like her feel emboldened. The fact that she was still in a position of authority after previous complaints shows a lack of follow-through." Cynthia sighed, her expression softening. "You're not wrong. We've been reviewing our internal processes, and it's clear there are gaps. Guest complaints weren't being escalated properly, and the training on inclusivity and bias clearly needs an overhaul." Elijah nodded. "This isn't just about my family. It's about ensuring no other family feels unwelcome or excluded. The way forward has to include concrete actions, training, accountability, and a commitment to doing better." The captain exchanged a glance with Cynthia before responding. "What do you suggest?" Elijah took a deep breath. "First, I'd like to see a formal apology issued, not just to my family, but to all passengers. Transparency about addressing bias is critical. Second, implement mandatory training for your staff. Make it clear that discrimination in any form won't be tolerated. And third, ensure that passengers have a clear and effective way to report issues without fear that they'll be ignored." Cynthia nodded, making notes as Elijah spoke. "Those are actionable steps," she said. "I'll push to have them implemented as soon as we dock." Captain Reynolds added, "And rest assured, Karen Shaw's employment with this cruise line is being reviewed. Her actions have no place here." Satisfied but still cautious, Elijah stood, extending a hand to the captain. "Thank you for taking this seriously. I'll be watching to see how it's handled." The captain shook his hand firmly. "You have my word, Mr. Williams." Meanwhile, Karen Shaw sat in her cabin, her face flushed with humiliation. The clipboard she had clung to like a shield for so long now sat discarded on the desk. Her dismissal from duties at the gala had sent a clear message, but instead of reflecting on her actions, Karen stewed in resentment. "This isn't fair," she muttered to herself. "I was just doing my job." But deep down, Karen knew her actions had gone beyond enforcing protocol. She had allowed her biases to influence her decisions, and now she was paying the price. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. "Come in," she called, her voice clipped. A junior crew member entered hesitantly, holding a sealed envelope. "This just arrived for you." Karen took the envelope, her fingers trembling as she opened it. The letter inside was brief and to the point. Effective immediately, she was being relieved of her duties for the remainder of the voyage, pending a review of her conduct. Karen's chest tightened as she read the final line. Your actions do not align with the values of this company. For the first time, she felt the weight of her decisions, but rather than admit fault, Karen clung to her resentment, convinced she had been wronged. Back in their suite, the Williams family prepared for an evening of relaxation. Naomi had arranged for a private dinner on their balcony, a quiet moment away from the bustle of the ship. Jaden set the table while Elijah uncorked a bottle of wine. This feels better, Naomi said, lighting a small candle on the table. Just us, no drama. Jaden grinned. And no Karen. Elijah chuckled, taking the seat. She's probably not enjoying her evening as much as we are. The family laughed, the tension of the past few days easing for the first time. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the ocean, they allowed themselves to savor the moment. But even as they enjoyed their peaceful dinner, Elijah's mind remained focused on the bigger picture. This was about more than just one family's experience. It was about ensuring the ship's culture changed for the better. And he wasn't about to let that mission slip away. Unbeknownst to the Williams family, Karen wasn't the only one feeling the fallout of the situation. The whispers among passengers had grown louder, and many were voicing their own concerns about how the cruise line handled complaints. The ship's management team was now under pressure to prove they could address these issues effectively, and the spotlight was brighter than ever. For Elijah, this wasn't just a personal victory. It was the beginning of meaningful change, a ripple effect. As the family continued their evening on the balcony, the ship's public address system chimed. A voice came through, soft and professional, but with a note of gravity. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Reynolds speaking. I want to take a moment to address an issue that has come to our attention during this voyage. It has been brought to my notice that one of our guests has experienced treatment that falls below the standards we hold ourselves to as a company. On behalf of the entire crew, I want to apologize and assure you that steps are being taken to address the situation and ensure it never happens again. The announcement hung in the air, a mix of surprise and curiosity rippling through the ship. Elijah leaned back in his chair, a faint smile playing on his lips. Naomi exchanged a look with him, her expression a blend of relief and pride. Well, she said softly, that's a start. Jaden looked up from his plate, his eyebrows raised. That's what happens when Dad goes full executive mode. Elijah chuckled. This isn't about flexing power, Jaden. It's about accountability. They needed to acknowledge the problem, and now they have. Naomi reached across the table, her hand finding Elijah's. You've done more than most people would. You've turned this into something bigger. That's the point, Elijah replied. If we don't stand up, nothing changes. The announcement sparked conversations throughout the ship. In the premium lounge, a group of passengers debated the implications. An elderly couple who had witnessed Karen's behavior at the gala shared their support for the Williams family, while others expressed skepticism about how much would actually change. Meanwhile, Cynthia, the operations manager, moved swiftly to implement the promised reforms. She convened an emergency meeting with department heads, outlining new protocols for handling guest complaints and emphasizing the importance of bias training for the crew. This isn't just about fixing what happened on this voyage, Cynthia said, her tone firm. This is about setting a new standard. The department heads nodded, their faces serious. The incident had been a wake-up call, and no one wanted to be caught in the crossfire of another public scandal. The following morning, Elijah received a call from Victor Hughes, the senior executive at the cruise line's corporate office. The two men had known each other professionally for years, but this conversation was personal. Elijah, Victor began, his voice steady but apologetic. I've been following everything that's happened. I want to thank you for bringing this to our attention and for handling it with such professionalism. I appreciate that, Victor, Elijah replied. But the real test will be what happens next. Words are one thing. Actions are another. Agreed, Victor said. I've already authorized a full review of the ship's policies, and we're bringing in an external consultant to oversee bias training for all crew members. Additionally, Karen Shaw's employment is under formal review. Her behavior doesn't reflect who we are as a company. Elijah nodded, his tone measured. That's a good start, Victor. Just make sure it's not a one-time fix. This needs to be part of your culture. It will be, Victor assured him. And Elijah, your family's experience has been unacceptable. We're issuing a formal apology and offering a full refund for this voyage, along with a credit for a future trip. That's appreciated, Elijah said, but this was never about money. It's about respect. Victor paused, then replied with sincerity. And I believe you've made that clear. Thank you for holding us accountable. As the day unfolded, the Williams family noticed subtle changes around the ship. Crew members greeted them with more warmth and attentiveness, and several passengers approached them to express support. At the pool, a middle-aged woman with a kind smile stopped by their cabana. I just wanted to say thank you, she said, addressing Elijah. I've seen what your family has been through, and it's inspiring to see how you've handled it. You've made a difference for all of us. Elijah nodded, his gratitude genuine. Thank you. It's not just about us. It's about making sure no one else has to deal with this. Jaden, lounging in a chair nearby, smirked. Dad's basically a celebrity now. Naomi laughed, shaking her head. Let's hope this is the end of the drama. But Elijah, ever cautious, knew that change often came in waves. The first ripple had been set in motion, but the journey wasn't over. Still, for the first time in days, he allowed himself to relax, basking in the warmth of the sun and the support of those around him. This was the beginning of something bigger, and Elijah was ready to see it through. Justice served, change enacted. The final night of the cruise was a symphony of lights, laughter, and music. The ship's main deck had been transformed into a festive venue, with passengers dancing under a canopy of stars. Yet, for the Williams family, this evening wasn't just about celebration. It was a moment of triumph and reflection. Elijah adjusted the cuffs of his blazer as he stood at the railing, gazing out at the vast ocean. The moonlight danced on the waves, and for the first time in days, he felt the weight of the past week begin to lift. Naomi approached, her hand slipping into his. Thinking about tomorrow, she asked softly. Elijah nodded. And everything that led us here. This trip didn't go as planned, but maybe it was meant to happen this way. Naomi smiled. You've done more than anyone could have asked, Elijah. You've turned something awful into a chance for change. Jaden joined them, holding a soda in one hand and his phone in the other. So, what's the next move? Do we just let corporate handle it, or are we going full courtroom drama? Elijah chuckled, his gaze shifting to his son. Sometimes the best moves happen behind the scenes, Jaden. We've set the wheels in motion. Now it's about making sure they stay on track. A turning point for Karen. While the Williams family enjoyed the festivities, Karen Shaw sat in her cabin, packing her belongings with trembling hands. Her suspension had been officially extended, and a termination meeting awaited her upon docking. For years, Karen had operated under the belief that her seniority and adherence to protocol would shield her from consequences. Now she faced the stark reality that her actions had cost her not only her position, but also her reputation. Karen replayed her interactions with the Williams family in her mind, a swirl of defensiveness and guilt gnawing at her. Deep down, she knew Elijah's family had done nothing wrong. Yet she struggled to reconcile that truth with the resentment she'd harbored. A knock at the door startled her. She opened it to find Cynthia, the operations manager, standing with a clipboard. "May I come in?" Cynthia asked, her tone professional but not unkind. Karen nodded, stepping aside. Cynthia entered and placed the clipboard on the small desk. She took a deep breath before speaking. "Karen, I want to be clear. What happened on this voyage wasn't just a failure on your part. It was a failure on ours. We allowed behavior like yours to go unchecked for too long, and that's on us. But you also need to take responsibility for your actions. Karen's lips parted as if to protest, but she closed them again, sensing the futility of arguing. You're being let go, Cynthia continued, her tone firm. But I hope you take this as an opportunity to reflect and grow. Bias, whether intentional or not, has no place in the service industry, or anywhere else for that matter. Karen nodded stiffly, her throat tightening. She wanted to defend herself, to explain, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she lowered her gaze, murmuring a quiet, "I understand." Cynthia turned to leave but paused at the door. Karen, change is never easy, but it's necessary. I hope you find a way to move forward. The final confrontation. The next morning, as the ship docked, the Williams family prepared to disembark. They had packed their belongings, and their suite was once again a place of calm. Jaden leaned against the wall, watching as Elijah adjusted his tie in the mirror. "Do you think we'll see her again?" Jaden asked, his tone more curious than bitter. "Probably not," Elijah replied. "But if we do, it'll be on our terms." The family made their way to the main deck, where passengers were gathering to disembark. As they waited, Captain Reynolds approached, his expression warm but serious. "Mr. Williams, Mrs. Williams, Jaden," the captain began, "I want to thank you for your patience and for bringing this issue to light. It's prompted changes that were long overdue." Elijah extended his hand. "Thank you, Captain. I hope this is just the beginning." "It is," Reynolds assured him. "Corporate has already begun implementing new policies, and we're launching mandatory training for all crew members. Your family's experience won't be forgotten." Before the conversation could continue, Karen appeared on the deck, escorted by Cynthia. Her demeanor was subdued, and she avoided making eye contact with the Williams family. For a moment, the air felt charged, the memory of every confrontation between them resurfacing. Karen hesitated, then took a step forward. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Mr. Williams, Mrs. Williams, Jaden, I want to apologize. I was wrong. There's no excuse for how I treated you." Naomi's face softened, and she glanced at Elijah. He nodded, his expression neutral but firm. "It's not us you need to convince, Karen. It's yourself. I hope you take this as an opportunity to learn and do better." Karen nodded silently, then turned and followed Cynthia toward the crew's disembarkation area. As she disappeared into the crowd, Jaden let out a low whistle. "Didn't see that coming." Naomi smiled gently. "Everyone deserves a chance to grow, Jaden, even people who've made mistakes. A new beginning." As the family stepped off the ship, they were greeted by a corporate representative waiting with a black SUV to take them to the airport. The representative handed Elijah an envelope containing a formal apology letter, a full refund, and additional compensation for their experience. Elijah glanced at the envelope, but tucked it into his jacket pocket. "It's not about the money," he said quietly. Jaden raised an eyebrow. "What is it about then?" "It's about ensuring respect, not just for us, but for everyone," Elijah replied. "Sometimes standing up isn't about what you get out of it. It's about what you leave behind." Naomi placed a hand on his arm. "And I think we've left something important behind, a message that things have to change." As the SUV pulled away from the port, the Williams family sat in quiet reflection. The cruise had been far from the relaxing getaway they'd envisioned, but it had become something more significant. It was a story of resilience, a stand against injustice, and a reminder of the power of holding people accountable. As the ocean faded into the distance, Elijah felt a sense of peace. The storm had passed, and the path forward was clear, not just for his family, but for everyone who followed. The legacy of change. As the SUV moved through the coastal city, the Williams family reflected on their unexpected journey. While the trip had been marred by challenges, it had also brought out their collective strength and resolve. Jaden broke the silence, his voice thoughtful. Do you think Karen will actually change, or was that just her trying to save face? Elijah turned to his son, his expression measured. Change is hard, Jaden. It takes effort and self-reflection. Whether Karen chooses to grow from this is up to her. But what matters is that she's been held accountable. That's a start. Naomi smiled at her husband, admiration in her eyes. And you've set an example, not just for Karen, but for everyone who saw what happened. You've shown that it's possible to stand up without losing your composure or dignity. Jaden leaned back in his seat, a small smirk tugging at his lips. So basically, we're the heroes of the cruise. I can live with that. The family laughed, the tension of the past days finally lifting. They arrived at the airport, their luggage quickly whisked away by attentive staff. As they passed through security and into the departure lounge, Elijah received a text message from Victor Hughes. Elijah, I wanted to personally thank you again. Corporate has approved the new policies we discussed, and we're working on a public statement to address bias in the service industry. Your family's courage has sparked meaningful change. I'll keep you updated. Elijah read the message aloud, prompting a smile from Naomi and a satisfied nod from Jaden. Sounds like they're finally taking things seriously, Naomi said. Elijah slipped his phone into his pocket. They are. And now it's up to them to follow through. A story to tell. As their flight took off, Jaden stared out the window at the shrinking coastline. He turned to his parents, a mischievous glint in his eye. You know, this would make a great story, maybe even a viral video. Naomi laughed. You and your social media. Let's focus on the takeaway here, not the likes. Fine, Jaden said, grinning. But seriously, what's the takeaway? Elijah leaned forward, his tone thoughtful. The takeaway is that we have a responsibility to stand up, not just for ourselves, but for others. When we see injustice, we can't ignore it. We have to address it, even if it's uncomfortable. Jaden nodded slowly, his usual humor replaced with genuine understanding. So, it's about more than just us. It's about making things better for everyone. Exactly, Naomi said, her voice warm. And no matter what, we've shown that kindness and firmness can go hand in hand. Epilogue. The ripple effect. Months later, the Williams family received an email from the cruise line. Attached was a press release announcing a new initiative, the Equality and Respect at Sea program. The release detailed the implementation of mandatory bias training, a streamlined complaint system, and a commitment to fostering a welcoming environment for all guests. Elijah read the email aloud to Naomi and Jaden as they sat in their living room. They actually followed through, Naomi said, her tone both surprised and impressed. Elijah nodded. It's a start, and it shows that standing up can lead to real change. The email ended with an invitation for the Williams family to return as honored guests for a future cruise, their expenses fully covered. Jaden laughed as he read the final line. Think Karen will still be working there? Naomi shook her head. Somehow, I doubt it. Elijah smiled, placing the email aside. It's not about going back. It's about knowing we've helped pave the way for a better experience for others. As the family moved on with their lives, the lessons from their cruise stayed with them. The Williams family had not only weathered the storm, but had become a beacon of resilience and advocacy. They had turned a moment of adversity into a movement for change, proof that standing firm against injustice, with dignity and determination, could make waves that stretched far beyond the horizon. And so, their story ended not as a tale of a ruined vacation, but as a testament to the power of standing up for what's right, leaving a legacy of respect and equality in their wake.